Welcome to Ideas to DNA. In 2002, a man walked into a meeting with the world's leading aerospace engineers and made them an offer. He wanted to buy a rocket. They laughed at him, not because the idea was crazy, but because the price they quoted him, $80 million per launch, would have bankrupted his company before a single payload reached orbit. The engineers sent him home. The math, they told him, was simply impossible. He did not argue. He did not negotiate. He went home and asked himself a completely different question. That question and what it unlocked is why SpaceX exists today. And it is the first of 5 thinking tools that I am going to give you in this video. Here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody teaches you in school, in university, or in any corporate training program I have ever encountered. We are all walking through life with an almost embarrassingly small number of thinking tools. Most people have 2, their gut, which is just accumulated bias shaped by past experience, and logic, which only works when all the relevant variables are visible, which in the real world they almost never are. And so we make decisions the way a carpenter would try to build a house using only a hammer. Every problem gets treated like a nail. We keep hitting, and we keep wondering why the house looks wrong. Charlie Munger had a different theory. He called it the Latticework of mental models, a connected web of thinking frameworks drawn from psychology, mathematics, physics, biology, and economics. Not one lens, many lenses, applied together. He believed, and his $2 billion life proved, that the person with the most thinking tools wins. Not the smartest person, not the hardest working person. The person who sees the problem from the most angles before committing to an answer. Today, I am giving you 5 of those tools, but I am not going to explain them the way textbooks do. I am going to show you the exact moment in history when each one changed everything. Let's begin. It is 2001. Elon Musk wants to put a greenhouse on Mars, a small biodome, a proof of concept, something that would reignite humanity's interest in space exploration. He goes to Russia to buy a refurbished intercontinental ballistic missile. The Russians quote him $20 million per rocket. He walks out. On the flight home, he opens a spreadsheet and starts listing the raw materials a rocket is actually made of: aluminum alloys, titanium, carbon fiber, copper wire, aerospace-grade polymers. He prices every single component at market value. The total cost of raw materials to build the rocket from scratch is approximately 2% of what the Russians charged him. 2%. The remaining 98% of the price was not material cost. It was assumption. It was precedent. It was the inherited inertia of an industry that had never once asked whether things needed to be done this way. Musk founded SpaceX, built his own rockets, and within a decade reduced the cost of a launch by nearly 90%. That is first principles thinking, the discipline of stripping a problem down to what is undeniably, fundamentally true, and building your solution from there, not from precedent, not from convention, from bedrock. Every assumption you inherit from your industry, your profession, or your past is a cost you are paying without knowing it. The trigger question: what would I believe about this problem if no one had ever solved it before? What assumption in your work right now are you treating as a fact when it may simply be a habit that everyone forgot to question? There is a story Munger loved to tell about a farmer. The farmer asked, "Where will I die so I never go there?" It sounds morbid, it sounds like pessimism, but Munger saw it as the clearest form of strategic thinking available to the human brain because he understood something fundamental about how we are wired. We are not, at our core, opportunity-seeking machines. We are threat detection machines. Evolution spent 200,000 years building a brain that was extraordinarily good at identifying what could kill us and extraordinarily bad at imagining futures that do not yet exist. Most goal setting fights that wiring. Inversion works with it. Instead of asking, "How do I succeed?" Inversion asks, how do I guarantee failure, and then avoids those outcomes with ruthless discipline. In practice, this is how it worked for Munger himself. When evaluating a business investment, he did not start by imagining how well the company could perform. He started by asking what would have to be true for this company to go completely bankrupt. He would map out every route to catastrophe, and if any of those routes looked plausible, he walked away. He was not looking for perfection. He was systematically eliminating the paths to ruin. Warren Buffett described their partnership this way. Charlie says all he wants to know is where he is going to die, so he will never go there, and it is a very useful way to think. This is inversion, the practice of solving problems by defining failure first and engineering around it. The trigger question: if I wanted this to fail completely, what would I do? Now, am I currently doing any of those things? 3 models in, but before we continue, I want you to hold something. These are not abstract frameworks. They are the actual thinking moves that separated Munger's decisions from the average investor's decisions. The difference is not intelligence, it is deliberate deployment. The next 2 models are the ones most people either dismiss as obvious or never learn to apply at the right moment. Keep watching. In the 19th century, the British colonial government in India faced a growing problem. Delhi was overrun with venomous cobras, dangerous, deadly. Something had to be done. So the government announced a bounty program. Turn in a dead cobra, receive a cash reward. Brilliant, simple, logical. Within weeks, the cobra population began to drop. The program appeared to be working. Then something unexpected happened. Enterprising locals who were not about to spend their days hunting wild snakes when they could simply farm them began breeding cobras in captivity, killing them, and collecting the rewards at scale. When the colonial government discovered the farms, they canceled the bounty program immediately. The cobra farmers, now holding thousands of worthless snakes, released them all. Delhi ended the program with more cobras than it started with. This is now known as the Cobra effect, and it is one of history's most vivid demonstrations of what happens when decision-makers think only one step ahead. The government asked, what happens if we offer a cobra bounty? First-order answer, people will hunt cobras. Problem solved. Second-order thinking would have asked, and then what? What does a rational person do when there's money attached to a cobra? Cannot incentive be gamed? Who benefits most from gaming it, and do they have the means to do so? 3 additional questions, 3 minutes of extra thinking, and an entirely different policy. The trigger question: what is the most obvious response to the incentive I'm creating, and what happens after that? What decision are you currently making where you have traced only the first consequence and stopped there? I've built a free mental models cheat sheet alongside this video. All 5 models, their trigger questions, and a decision-making template you can apply immediately to any real problem you are facing right now. You'll find the link to the practical toolkit in the description below. Because knowledge only matters when it changes how you think and how you behave. 2 models left. These are the quiet ones, the ones Munger used the most and talked about the least. It is 1999. The internet is changing everything. Stock prices for technology companies are doubling, tripling. Every investor in America is abandoning their strategy to chase the wave. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are asked, why aren't you buying tech stocks? Their answers shocked the financial world. We don't understand them. Not we think they're overvalued. Not the fundamentals don't support the prices. Simply, we do not understand them well enough to have a reliable opinion. The financial press ridiculed them. Buffett was declared finished, a relic of an old economy he no longer understood. His company's stock fell sharply. He was invited to fewer conferences. The mockery was public and sustained. Then the dot-com bubble collapsed. Between 2000 and 2002, the Nasdaq lost 78% of its value. Trillions of dollars of paper wealth evaporated. Companies that had been worth billions went to zero overnight. Berkshire Hathaway, which had sat quietly in the circle, emerged almost untouched.
This is the circle of competence, the radical counterintuitive act of knowing exactly where your knowledge is reliable and refusing to act outside that boundary, regardless of social pressure. The most dangerous position is not the outside of your circle, it is the edge, the boundary where you know just enough to feel confident, but not enough to know what you are missing. Munger had a phrase for this. He called it the know-nothing investor who pretends to know something, and he considered intellectual honesty about the limits of one's knowledge to be not a weakness, but a profound competitive advantage. The trigger question? Am I making this decision from inside my circle, or am I near the edge, mistaking proximity for expertise? Vienna, 1847. The maternity ward of the Vienna General Hospital has a problem that no one can explain. Women giving birth in the ward, staffed by doctors and medical students, are dying at a rate of 10%. Women giving birth in the ward staffed by midwives are dying at a rate of less than 2%. The hospital's leading physicians construct elaborate theories. They blame the air quality. They blame psychological distress. They blame posture. Theory after complex theory, none of them testable, none of them actionable. A young physician named Ignace Semmelweis does something different. He ignores the elaborate theories and asks the simplest possible question. What is the one thing the doctors do that the midwives do not? The answer? Doctors came directly from performing autopsies to delivering babies without washing their hands. The midwives never touched corpses. Semmelweis introduced mandatory hand washing. The death rate fell from 10% to below 2% almost immediately. The simplest explanation, overlooked because it was too obvious. This is Occam's razor. When multiple explanations account for the same evidence, begin with the simplest. Not because reality is always simple, but because complexity is often the noise we generate when a straightforward answer makes us uncomfortable. The trigger question, am I adding complexity here, or is this genuinely complex? And what is the simplest explanation that fits all the facts? Now here is what Munger spent a lifetime understanding. The power is not in any single tool. The power is in the latticework, the way they connect, contradict, and correct each other when you run a decision through all of them at once. Face a hard problem. Open the latticework. First principles. What is actually fundamentally true here? Inversion. How does this fail? Second order thinking. And then what? Circle of competence. Do I actually know enough to make this call? Occam's razor. Am I overcomplicating this? 5 lenses. 1 decision. Musk used 1 to build rockets. Munger used all 5 to build a fortune. Semmelweis used 1 to save thousands of lives. None of them were uniquely gifted. They were systematically better at seeing clearly. And that is all a mental model is. A discipline, a vision. The Cobra farmers and Colonial Delhi were not stupid. The dot-com investors were not reckless. The physicians were not cruel. They were intelligent people operating with an incomplete toolkit. Start with 1 model. Pick the story that stayed with you. For 7 days, deploy that single question. That's how the latticework gets built, 1 thread at a time. You'll find the link to the free Mental Models cheat sheet and to Poor Charlie's Almanac below. Which story hit you hardest and why? This is Ideas to DNA, where knowledge becomes action. I'll see you in the next video.